I want to get away from the idea of playing this game of whack-a-mole and instead zoom out and consider and think about what other areas of HR would want to know the information that we, ER, are seeing so that we can broadly, as a broad HR team, as a global HR team, think about how we begin to address these issues in tandem with the business, right?
How well do your employees understand the organization's employee relations process? When they have a concern, do they know where to go and to whom to talk and when? I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett. Welcome back to the Work Positive Podcast, coaching you to grow people and profits. People cannot trust what they don't understand. Many people leaders rarely consider whether their employee relations and investigative processes are readily understood by their employees. So when employees have concerns, they don't know where to go, they will seek that assistance externally. And that's a missed opportunity for you to mitigate risk while also building a culture of fairness and transparency. My guest helps us understand how a stronger function can drive culture and engagement, and where for you to start in developing and implementing one. Let's grow people through better employee relations and our profits too on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Work Positive Nation, you're in for a great treat because Margarita Ramos is here. Margarita, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Joey.
I am delighted. By the way, this podcast is brought to you by the Commonwealth of Virginia, because both of us are standing and sitting in Virginia right now. And remember, people, Virginia is for lovers. So you're in for it. How long do you think that's been a marketing slogan for the state of Virginia? All my life.
I think it's been around for a very long time.
It really has. Margarita, you are a superhero in so many regards, a stellar career, and you're continuing to make a difference. Work Positive community, the thing I love about Margarita, and that you're going to love through this podcast today, is that she takes what sometimes is regarded as a thorny issue, if you will, of legal implications around employee relations, and connects it with culture and how we can transform culture through understanding employee relations better. So I'm just stoked to have you on today, Margarita. Tell us, every superhero has an origin story. So tell us yours.
Sure. I mean, I think part of my origin story stems from my relationship with my mother. My mother migrated from Puerto Rico to New York City in the 1950s. And when she, like many migrants from Puerto Rico during that time, there was a strong influx of people from Puerto Rico for a whole host of reasons.
Yeah.
And when my mother arrived, she did not speak English, and it took her some time to learn the language so that she could find work, etc. And this was before she married and had children. When she ultimately married and had children, which wasn't too long after she migrated over, I became the youngest of 5 daughters. And
wow.
I became her translator.
Did you?
And yeah, and it never talked about, this is going to be your role.
Margarita, this is your job. You just sort of fell into it naturally. Yeah.
I just fell into it naturally, and I felt this need to protect her from what I could see were people who resented the fact that she was seeking assistance in whatever form that was and could not speak English. And I just thought, this just doesn't feel right. This feels really unfair and unkind. And, why can't you just be kind? And so I really bring that into my practice as an employee relations leader. And when I build teams, I look for that. I want to make sure that people are leading with empathy. This is very difficult work, but when it's done correctly, people should feel like they were seen and heard.
Mm.
And that really stems from, from that experience as, as the child of an immigrant.
I love that. And if, of course, we all live in a microcosm, but if we dial back to the 50s in the US, the civil rights movement had not occurred yet. And so there was much antagonism
Yes.
towards persons who were considered minorities, and certainly
Right.
someone who couldn't speak the language. Then I won't draw any parallels to today, but it would be pretty easy to, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to think we've come a long ways, Margarita, but maybe in some ways we have yet to. I love the way that you're talking about employee relations becoming leverage for empathy, right? So we were talking before we began recording, and I never really thought about this. So this is a new thought for me. I want you to tease it out for us. How employee relations can really become the nexus, the hub for informing so many other areas of HR, leadership development, talent development, whatever you want to call it, because that's the trap in the drain, if I can refer to it as that, where the problems show up. That's where they escalate and take on real meaning. So tease out that notion of how employee relations can really inform other HR functions.
Sure. Again, when done correctly, I believe that employee relations should be connecting with these other areas of human resources, in large part because employee relations has a window into the shifts in the culture for whatever reason the shifts are happening, right? We saw in 2019, 2020, when there were all kinds of protests happening across the United States, that spilled over into the workplace. George Floyd is murdered on national
Yeah,
television.
right.
That spills over into the workplace. So,
Mm.
whatever, even issues that are happening today
Hmm.
surrounding immigration and kinds of wars that are happening,
Mm.
that all of that stuff spills over into the workplace. And you can have an employee relations function that is playing whack-a-mole every day and moving on, right? And
Yeah.
if the work is hard. So I that, right? And I would agree, I respect that because depending on the kind of support that you do or don't have from the broader organization, that may be all that you can do, right? Is
Yeah.
play the game of whack-a-mole. But I want to get away from the idea of this game of whack-a-mole and instead zoom out and consider and think about what other areas of HR would want to know the information that we in ER are seeing so
Mm.
that we can broadly, as a broad HR team, as a global HR team, think about how we begin to address these issues in tandem with the business, right? This isn't
Mhm.
suggesting this is an HR problem. It's not. It's
Right.
an issue. And the organization should think about ways to come together to address it so it's not a one-off, I'm
Yeah.
dealing with one issue at a time, but
Yeah. I like
let's zoom out and figure out how we can collectively begin to look at these issues to address them.
Yeah, because even operationally, we can look and see what systems are creating repetitive issues where people feel devalued or unheard or invisible, as I like to say. And can we transform those so that they are seen and heard and valued? I love that. It seems like employee relations is, or at least in some of the organizations I've worked with, a euphemism for, keep our butt out of a sling, keep us from losing a bunch of money in a lawsuit or something. So what are some of the reputational issues that employee relations, in your experience, carries that really are, say, false notions?
Tell me a little more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, because we're saving the company money, and so you're in compliance in certain areas. But what I hear you talking about is something much more transformative, into where it's systemically touching operations and leadership and things like that.
Yeah, I to look at what employee relations does from the perspective of the employee life cycle, right? So from start to finish, when an employee applies for a role, they're not an employee at that point, they're a candidate, they get hired, they come in, now they're an employee. What is that experience like? And in particular, what happens to that employee when he or she or they or them experience a conflict in the workplace, whether that conflict is from their manager or whether that conflict is from a colleague, and does the culture of the company say or do when these conflicts unfold? What is the structure within the company that does or does not allow that employee to come forward with a sense of trust, with a sense of transparency, and with a sense of feeling that I can trust that this company and this group called employee relations is going to take a very neutral look at what it is that I'm sharing with them and look into it, right? Investigate it, unpack it, if you will.
And from a curiosity and learning perspective as well, so that you're not just there to defend the company against bad behavior.
Right. I mean, when I go into an investigation, a stakes investigation, let's say sexual harassment,
Mhm.
I'm not, mitigation is it's part of what I'm doing, right? I am looking to mitigate risk. But what I'm also doing is, and what I'm really, really on is making sure that every party to that investigation feels sufficiently comfortable with the knowledge of what it is that I do. I want that understood before that person comes before me. And the way that I've done that at other companies is, I talk to the chief people officer and them, right, of the way that I like to work and the way that I like to create these employee relations frameworks. And key for me is about transparency, right? If you want to build trust, you can't have this thick curtain that employees can't see through, right? That's you get an email from somebody that says you must show up on this Zoom call at this time and speak to this person that you've never met. You don't know what they look like,
Right.
have no idea what this process is going to, how it will unfold. I'm already nervous, right? It doesn't matter who I am within the company. I could be an employee, I could be part of the C suite. Receiving an email from a compliance function is frightening,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So, why not pull back the curtain and share with employees, everybody, the subject to an investigation, anybody who may have been a witness to the investigation, they can go to a website that's not terribly complicated, that has a list of FAQs, that really spells out what the ethos of the employee relations group is, the mission and vision statement,
Mm.
our ties to the culture, how it ties to the company code of conduct, all of those things, right? Links to the code of conduct, links to the anti-harassment, anti-retaliation policy, so that people can, sort of have a comfort level of, oh, this, they've got their act together. This is going to be taken seriously.
Mm.
And you can also see photos of the entire global employee relations team.
Ah.
Right? So that, oh, okay, I got an email from Margarita. That's what she looks like. And I can also look her up on LinkedIn and if I want to, and it's critically, I meet a lot of C-suite individuals who want to build trust, but they don't understand that a significant way to build trust is transparency.
Mm. Yeah, the psychological safety is so enhanced by vulnerability and
Yeah.
authenticity and transparency, qualities like that. I absolutely love it. So there's a user-friendly and employee-friendly process here whereby I can take my concerns and then those concerns are represented well because I'm heard, I'm seen, I'm valued, but also become learning points for the system for transformation of the culture. I absolutely love that. So the transformation nexus hub of employee relations that we're talking about here is for some of our listeners something they would aspire to or fantasize about or something like that because it's more common than I think it is, but I have yet to experience it that much. So let's say we're who we are, the kind of employee relations that you're talking about. How do sitting with someone who's top talent, I very much want to attract them to the company. I know when you were with Microsoft, you're after top talent all the time. How do we communicate, hey, this is the way we roll with employee relations here? How do I communicate that to top talent in such a way to represent the culture honestly, but attractively in such a way that they want to come join us?
I think, are you suggesting when you're hiring
Yeah, or any team for that matter,
yeah,
because what we're talking about here is this ER team permeates the entire organization, right?
yeah. I mean, I think you speak about in the context of all of the positives, right, that the
Right.
company offers, right?
Mm,
In my view, I see it as a benefit, right? It is a benefit that we offer to the employee population. If you've got a problem, we want to hear about it, right? And no, you and I both know that not every problem rises to the level of an investigation
right,
or policy violation.
right.
Sometimes people just want to be heard or
Yeah.
they need some guidance and some talking points or some practice around how to have a challenging conversation. That's another another that I think the average person in corporate workplaces is challenged by. We are no one likes conflict, right?
I
And
don't know. I've known a few people they were looking for a
well,
fight every day.
that's true. There are those types.
Yeah. But
But
among
in
us
general,
in the work positive community, we're not out looking for a fight. We
yeah.
want to avoid conflict.
Exactly. In general, most people want to avoid conflict. And depending on the nature of the conflict, avoiding it does not make it go away,
Mm,
right? It just
mhm.
enhances it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And things, sort of start to unravel. And sometimes that causes an employee to resign and to walk
Yeah.
away. And that's not what we want, right? And so again, to your point, how do we attract? You about things in a very transparent way. This is
Mm,
where our culture is today. This is what we are driving toward, right?
mm, mhm.
The some of the best experiences that I've had in doing the work that I do have unfolded when chief people officers have said to me, "We're not perfect. We to hire you because we want to fix this. So help us fix this."
Mm.
Right? Please bring your expertise to risk assess our current state and tell us what we need to do to get to a best in class state.
Mm, I love it. I love it. We're back to transparency and vulnerability, right? I love it. Let me ask you a question. What if the key to growing your work culture hides in plain sight? Take the free Work Positive Culture Assessment to discover it. Get insights in less than 4 minutes that transform your culture so you grow people and profits. You just answer 13 simple questions and discover your culture stage, strengths, and personalized next steps. Get your free aha culture moment at workpositive.today. Go to workpositive.today right now. Margarita Ramos is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. The show notes, she mentioned LinkedIn. Down in the show notes, you'll find the URL to her LinkedIn profile. So feel free to go check her out there, even while we're talking, unless you're on the Peloton or driving, and keep your hands on no wheel in your eyes on the road if you are. But you can message her there through LinkedIn. That's a great way of connecting with her so that you can find out. So you just reminded me because as we're recording this, in fact, when this airs, it may be out by now. I'm writing a book about retention called Stop the Revolving Door: How to Retain Top Talent Today. And that very thing is I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be valued. Even if I don't need an employee relations process, if you're talking to me about joining your company, I'm going to stay longer because I know there's that process should I experience some of the challenges that we're talking about here in case there is a bully or something that's on our team. So, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing today, Margarita, for companies, for organizations in creating this kind of employee relations influence within the company?
I'm seeing sometimes you see a reactionary approach,
Mm,
versus a strategic approach. So something bad happened, and so now I want to focus on the ER team, and that's a pretty good reason, right, to do it. And most HR leaders I have found know very little about ER, and that's okay too, right? Because
mm.
I love teaching. Um, I love the teaching part, and I love helping C-suite leaders understand the value of a function like employee relations. But what I've also seen is you can't just create an employee relations team without investments, right?
Mm,
Without investments in people,
yeah.
hiring the right people,
Mm,
experienced people who are grounded in, they don't have to be experts in employment law. That's a huge plus if you are, right? Because it's important to understand the law. It's important to be able to think critically. It's important to be comfortable pushing back because
mm.
when you're in ER, you are often, especially during a debrief meeting from an investigation, you're sometimes going to get pushback and you have to understand how to bring the right players into that debrief meeting
Mm.
and planning in advance for pushback and how you're going to respond to it. Um, and so and all of that takes investment, right? If I
Yes.
want to draw metrics from everything that I'm seeing across the board
Mm.
globally from an ER perspective, all of the investigations tied to issue types, how many sexual harassment cases have I seen? How many leave of absence complaints have I seen? What level of complaints am I seeing that are tied to business rhythms? So when the sales organization has their annual kickoff in Las Vegas, what did our case numbers look like following that kickoff? Quarter over quarter, year over year, if I have a case management system, I can share those metrics with you so that you can plan in advance in a proactive way when you have your next sales kickoff or when another business area is going to have their kickoff and the HR business partner can step in to help guide what we should have in place from an infrastructure perspective to make sure that we are addressing those issues in real time.
I love it. So what you're really talking about is creating efficiencies that allow more of the company's energy to go into its primary functions as opposed to dealing with employee relation functions.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
love that. I had not thought about it in that way exactly. That's insightful. You mentioned some samples, some examples of complaints. What are the more common complaints that you see in employee relations today?
I think it's that's a great question because I think obviously the world changes and evolves,
Yes,
right? I've been
right.
doing this for several decades.
Hmm.
And what I'm seeing today, especially from younger generation, is a willingness to come forward and say, this is who I am. I am neurodivergent. This is how I see the world. And therefore, these are the challenges that I am experiencing with my leader who expects me to behave like this when my mind functions like this.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing a lot of those types of cases. We continue to see many of the same cases that, that I've seen since I started doing this a long time ago. Sexual harassment, bullying, I think happens a lot more. I remember when I initially started this work, no one wanted to deal with bullying, because the
Hmm.
view was it's not illegal, per se,
Okay.
to engage in bullying, at least, when I started.
Yeah.
Um, But most companies have an anti-bullying policy today because there's a recognition that a lot of behaviors to some degree are grounded in bullying. And so
Hmm.
as an employer, you have to address it. It's potentially misconduct.
Sure. And again, it's inefficient to have bullying going on, and it's a
That doesn't help your culture. Your
Mhm.
employees are watching how you're dealing with it or not
Yeah,
dealing with it. And
absolutely.
it's what causes people to exit stage left. They're not gonna, they don't want to tolerate it and they shouldn't have to.
They don't have to, and they will exercise that choice. That's one of the key points in Stop the Revolving Door that I'm writing now is people leave because of feelings, because
Absolutely.
of that invisibility, because I'm not valued. And I don't think it's, well, let me state it positively. I believe it's psychologically appropriate and operationally efficient for everyone to be productive, and therefore the driver of that is being seen and heard and valued, right, as a part of my work every day. So really, we're redefining work.
I think so.
Yeah, I love it. Margarita Ramos is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Margarita, I mentioned your LinkedIn profile. When we go to LinkedIn, and in fact, we've put the URL to an article that you wrote that's featured on LinkedIn about a SHRM, a little SHRM settlement. I was at about $11.5 million adjudicated in Denver. So, what? Give us one key takeaway from that article when we go to read it.
One key takeaway from an employee relations perspective is you really have to understand that when it comes to workplace investigation, the investigator must act neutrally,
Ah,
meaning the investigator should not be wearing multiple hats. The investigator
yeah,
should not be an HR business partner. The investigator should not be the head of benefits. The investigator should not have some other role and they've been voluntold to conduct. That
yes.
that is not how it should work, and that is
Mm.
part of a significant issue and reason, I believe, why the jury came back with an $11.5 million verdict. And keep in mind that at least 10 million of that, I believe, was aligned to punitive damages.
Wow, that's a
Right?
huge.
That was jury's way of saying this was wrong.
Mhm.
This was retaliation, and you should be punished for that. That's what,
Wow.
that's essentially what punitive damages means.
And your
Uh,
takeaway is we could have avoided all that with dual relationships being cleared up and there being a singular line of focus there with a.
Absolutely. I think key takeaway in the Sherm case is that the investigator who was assigned to investigate the concern of race discrimination brought by the plaintiff, that individual had this was his first and only investigation at the time,
Wow, that was an
and
expensive learning lesson.
it's very expensive. And
Yeah.
when he took the stand, the jury heard a couple of things, right? The jury
Mm.
heard that it was his first investigation. The jury also heard that from a training perspective, he recalled having taken one course where he was trained in how to conduct investigations. And when asked on the stand, what did he recall from the course, his response was that he could not recall what he learned from that experience. So again, you assign on a hot and stakes case.
Yeah.
You assign someone with almost no experience, right?
Very ill prepared to investigate a high
Extremely,
profile case.
extremely ill prepared. And to matters worse, before the investigation concluded, that same investigator removed his investigator hat, put on an HR business partner hat, and began coaching the manager of the plaintiff.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but that's just
And ghostwriting. You're laughing.
it's ludicrous. I mean, if you look up conflict of interest, that case should be right there, right? Oh my goodness.
And what's interesting, when I wrote the article and posted it on LinkedIn, it got a lot of sort of pro and con kinds of comments, and some people were angry because I think their reading the article was that I was picking on SHRM, and I was not picking on SHRM.
Just the facts of the case, right?
When you hold yourself out as a or the leader in human resources, you have to do better, and you have to be held to a higher standard. And I think that's what the jury did.
Yeah, exactly. So the link to that article is in the show notes. Be sure, Work Positive Community, to go there and avail yourself of that. So Margarita Ramos, Work Positive Community, always wants to know from my guests, so I've got to ask you. We talked about so much today that's just really helped broaden all of our horizons in understanding employee relations. What's your one thing, Margarita Ramos, that you would recommend to the Work Positive Community to do starting today to create the kind of positive work culture that we're talking about here?
I would say, look at, from an HR compliance perspective, I would say, look at what's called your control. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that, controls are the policies, practices that address how employees raise concerns in your organization, right? Make sure that those policies and practices are legally sound. Make sure that you are hiring the right people to work in your employee relations function. Make sure that your employee relations function is not compromised, that when they conduct investigations, they have the right level of air coverage by either the leader of the employee relations function, and sometimes the CHRO needs to step in to make sure that we're applying discipline in a consistent way. What do I mean by that? Meaning that if is in the C-suite, that we're not treating that subject better than we're treating someone who's not in the C-suite. And the last piece is metrics, right? You've got to track this work. You cannot do this work and be successful and transparent if you're not tracking. When I track metrics, I can use those metrics to tell a story to the C-suite, to business leaders. I can say, we're not picking on you. I can show you metrics that point to the fact that we took similar action against a leader in another business a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 quarters ago. And that's it's critically important to have a case management system.
I love it. I love it. Margarita Ramos has been my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Margarita, I'm better for this conversation. I certainly have learned a lot today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with the Work Positive community today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I had fun.
I'm so grateful you joined our conversation about creating positive work cultures that grow people and profits. connect with me directly on LinkedIn today. Just search for Dr. Joey Fawcett, or you can click the link in your show notes. When you send your connection request, mention you're a Work Positive Podcast listener, because I want to give you a free digital copy of my Work Positive Team Edition book. It's a $19.95 value, but I want to share it with you free because it contains practical strategies that I personally use with clients to transform toxic work environments into thriving cultures. We explore in that book how to create a positive work culture, and we do so again in every episode of this podcast. Our LinkedIn connection allows you and me to directly talk about your specific challenges, so feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. I personally read and respond to all those messages because I genuinely care about your work positive success. So go to LinkedIn and let's connect. Remember to mention you're a podcast listener to receive your free Work Positive Team Edition book. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Work Positive Podcast.